thank you again for joining us on a different platform. Not ideal, but you guys have made it. Well done for showing up to learn some new things on a Thursday morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you guys are in the world. And we're really excited to dive into how to write some emails that actually get responses. So to start off, we're going to talk about how to write a strong subject line. So the subject line is, we're talking about it first because it's the prerequisite for even writing email copy. That's the kind of precondition. People won't even read your good email copy if they aren't clicking on the email. And the reason that they're going to click on that email and open it up is because you've written a strong subject line. So there are a couple of tips that you can follow very, very easily, implement very easily on writing a really strong subject line. So I will let Rajat touch on a couple of those.
Sure. So anyone in the SDR outbound email world knows that, the first thing you need to make sure that your subject line is really strong so that the first metrics we track are the open rates. So some do's and don'ts from my side as far as subject lines are concerned. So first point, do not keep the subject line more than 4 words. And as far as our experience as predictable revenue goes, 2 to 3 words give you an open rate of more than 60%. Second will be, be precise and concise. Don't beat around the bush. Be very clear, and a very good tactic around that is pick up 2 or 3 words from your email copy and use those as your subject lines. Lastly, some don't do's for the subject lines. Do not use abbreviations or everything in caps. I have seen some companies who have their tools or services. Their name is all in caps or it is an abbreviation. So it tends to be on the higher side of the spam rate. Your email tends to land in spam more than when you don't use the abbreviations or everything in small. And there are some tons of tools out there, for example, Prospect.io, where you can just check your subject line. You can put in the words, for example, some words like sales or optimization or best are the kind of words which have higher tendency for the emails to land in spam. So if you are using those, it is time to get back and recheck your subject lines.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And there are a couple of other tips that I want to add in here. So you can be taking a couple of different approaches with your emails, depending on things like the size of your total addressable market, or if you have a specific account list that you're targeting, or even based on the average customer value of your company. So we know, kind of as a general rule of thumb, that for those of us who have an average customer value of $10,000 or less and a larger total addressable market, you can be sending at a slightly higher volume and spending a little less time on customization versus on the other end of the spectrum. If you've got, say, 100 accounts, really, really top tier accounts that you're supposed to be targeting, and your average deal size is $1 million, they're worth a lot more, and you want to be customizing and taking advantage of every single prospect and every single email that you're sending. So 2 different approaches. There are hybrids. You can do a combination, but for the purposes of today, we'll just talk about it in kind of a binary. So you've got your automated approach, which is when you do little or no customization, and you have your personalized approach, which is when you do more or a lot of customization. So the subject line in an automated approach can be slightly vague, slightly general, but pique someone's interest. So you might touch on something like a pain in their industry, just using 2 words to describe a pain. You might do something like use a custom variable that your sales enablement tool like Outreach, HubSpot, Salesloft, whatever, will allow you to use. So you might say their first name and then a pain point or something like that, but definitely following all of those constraints that Rajat mentioned as well. And then on the flip side, if you are going to go for that really heavily customized approach, then you want to show that you've done your personalization and your research in that subject line itself. Give yourself every opportunity for them to click on that email and respond to it by saying, a little snippet of something that you found on them online, or your comment on LinkedIn, or something that refers to this customization piece that you found. But we will dive into more of that in just a second. But first of all, we're going to dive into just the kind of general structure of what makes a good sales email overall. Back to Rajat.
Awesome. So this is something I have been experimenting with my campaigns. So how I break up my email is, it is generally into 3 parts. The first part is about a problem that your ICP or your target market must be experiencing. And that actually comes from a good research. So the list you are targeting to should be a very robust list that every ICP is of the similar level, seniority, and in the industry. And also, I mean, they must be experiencing those pains. So you can also achieve scalability along with personalization. So the first part or the first line, I always start with a question. Okay, is this a pain that you are experiencing in your day-to-day jobs? And then I move into the second paragraph when I talk about the solution. I tend not to name the product or the tool in the first email. I just paint a picture in front of them. Okay, imagine if you have such a solution and you can do wonders with that. So, I mean, how can that solution make your life easier on day-to-day basis? Or how can that solution make you more awesome at what you do? I'm a big fan of Josh Brown. I follow him on LinkedIn. So he has this saying that, for example, your prospect is Mario and your tool is the fire flower. And so do not talk about the fire flower in your email. If that fire flower makes Mario the badass Mario, talk about the badass Mario in the email chain. So I'll have some examples. I'll go to them, but over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely. So this kind of email structure that we're talking about here is ideal for that initial email. So that's the first email that you're sending, the first touch that you're sending out to a prospect in a cold email sequence or a cold multi-channel sequence. So this structure, this framework is not the hard rule for every single email that you'd be sending throughout the sequence. We will touch on that in a little bit, kind of how you build that follow-up afterwards. But what we're talking about here is that first cold email that you're sending out to the prospect. And just another point on the superpower and kind of talking about the impact that you'll make for the customer rather than talking about your own product. That is something that we've absolutely seen time and time again. If you're going straight into what people call a feature dump, or you're diving straight into you kind of product focused messaging, it's not strong. It doesn't get the response rates because you could theoretically be sending that email to every single person in your total addressable market. It doesn't seem to speak to the prospect in particular. And you can make it speak to your prospect in particular, even if you aren't customizing. And the way you do that is through relevance, as Rajat mentioned. So part of relevance is taking a look at your total addressable market or your ICP, your overall ICP, and saying, okay, how can I break down further this group of prospects? Because when I do that, if I can break them into small groups or segments, and that might be based on a pain that they feel, it might be based on their job title and the type of company that they're in, might be based on the amount of revenue that they have, because a company that has, $100,000 in revenue, probably experiencing some different challenges from, a Fortune 500 company. So break down that ICP into small bite-sized chunks, because then you can write messaging that does, go one to many, it does scale, but it's really, really relevant to each person that is receiving that email. So the other thing that I like to think of when speaking about the impact, if we're going to talk about the way that this improves Mario's life, for instance, we don't want to go with these kind of sweeping generalities, like it'll help you save money, it'll help you make more money, because honestly, every single product or service in the world is there to do one of those two things. It's either like saving time, saving money, making time, making money. It's one of those things. So you're not going to differentiate if you're saying something like that. But if you can tell Mario how it makes an impact on his job, and his job is to try and achieve this larger kind of business function or this larger goal for his company, that is where your power comes in. That's showing them how you can make them a better version of themselves. So you might be saying something like specific, like you can spend less time doing X process that's time consuming and more time doing Y process, which is revenue generating. And that's where your research comes in, the research that you've done on these segments and on your ICP, so that you can really pick those things that will be relevant and impactful for your particular prospect that you're reaching out to. And then what comes next after those, the problem and the solution, are your CTAs. And there are a couple of rules that we want to follow with the CTAs, and I'll let Rajat cover some of those first.
Correct. So now when I talk about the first two parts of my email, the last part is the CTA. We have experimented a lot around them. And specifically talking about the first email outreach you are doing, we have seen that a softer CTA with a cognitive decision to be made by the prospect works well, rather than asking them straight away, okay, are you available for 30 minutes this Wednesday? So rather than asking that, you should be asking, or we have seen that, does that sound interesting? Would it be a terrible idea if we connect and discuss what the product can do for you? Or, I mean, anything around, but not asking a very hard call to action from the prospect, because as a human nature is there. We are averse of saying yes to anything. That is very new to us. So, I mean, if you are sending, your campaign is designed like you are sending the bunch of mails like 3, 3, and 3. So what we have seen that asking a softer CTA in the first email, then when you send a follow-up email, then asking them, okay, will you be available for 30 minutes on this or this day, or how does your calendar look like this week or the next week? So that is how, I mean, you should be building credibility, not asking everything straight away, but okay, giving them some more information in the follow-up emails, and then asking and being clear that what you want from them.
Yeah, exactly. That first email is there to kind of open the door, gauge if you've hit a nerve with that pain point or that issue or that challenge that you've brought up. It's not to close in that moment, like get them on the phone, get that meeting scheduled. Of course, that would be ideal. It's lovely if they then respond and say like, great, let's meet on Thursday. But you're not trying to push for that in that first CTA. As Rajat said, it has lost its power. People are not interested in you kind of assuming that you're a fit for them and then asking for their time. It's too much of an ask right off the bat. The ask that you need to be making is just, is this worth your time? Or is this worth having a think about or a chat about? It's just kind of opening up the conversation for the very first time. And then, as Rajat said, as you kind of build the later steps or the follow-up steps of your sequence, then you can get more direct. Once you've kind of continued with the narrative, built a story, maybe given some social proof and some reasons why they should take the call, then it makes more sense to drop it in. And the other thing is with your CTA and the kind of softer CTA is that you're giving the power to the prospect rather than just taking the power yourself by saying, I think I'm worth the time, what time works, rather giving them the opportunity to kind of opt in to that meeting. So giving them the power. And just a little kind of example of what Rajat was saying there about how we're kind of averse to saying yes, because it's just something that we don't like to do if we're not 100% sure what we're agreeing to. A great example that I've heard for this, and I think it might even be Josh Braun who tells this story, but it's like when you go to the mall or you go to a market or whatever, and you're walking past the stall that sells sunglasses and somebody like pops out and they're like, hey, do you want to try on some sunglasses? Like, hey, do you like to go in the sun? You want to try some sunglasses? And you're like, I know if I say yes, they're going to like rope me in. I'm going to end up trying a bunch of stuff and feel pressured to buy. And it's just not worth it for me. It's much, much too much of a commitment for me to say yes. So you want to give them that really frictionless option, which is just the soft, like, hey, are you in the market for sunglasses right now? Yes. Okay. Then maybe we can talk about trying some on. And next we have our follow-up email. So as we mentioned, the framework that we have touched on so far is for that initial email, very first cold touch. Your follow-up emails, they can differ a little bit. And there's no kind of hard and fast rule of exact templates that you should be using in an exact order after that initial email. We've done tons of experimentation that shows that the framework that we have just talked about is really, really the strongest way to go for a first touch. But after that, really, you can experiment, you can try. And that's kind of the fun part with outbound. But the first one that we would like to touch on is a bumper email. And I'll let Rajat talk about that.
So I really love the bumper emails. So this is something new I have been experimenting. So what happens is we have to understand how a typical day of our prospects looks like. He may be getting 100 or 150 emails like we are sending him. So why he should be replying, or he may be in a meeting or somewhere busy. So he did read our email, but he did not have a time to reply to it, or maybe he missed out on replying. What we are trying is, as a thumb rule, the third email of the mail chain, we just send in one line. Okay, did you have, is this interesting? Will you want to have a chat about it? Any thoughts about my previous message and all of that sort? So the maximum replies we are getting, obviously it's a buildup of the first email and the second email, but the maximum replies we are getting are from those bumper emails, just one-liners, just bumping in, okay, did you have a chance? Did it sound interesting? Does it make sense for us to talk? And these are the bumper emails we are trying, experimenting, and have been successful for us.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a really common one. And even Justin Michael talks about having that bumper email that literally is just the word thoughts ? And so it can definitely draw that attention back up to your first email. And if your first email is strong and relevant, that's a great thing to draw the attention back there. The other thing that I like to do over the course of my follow-up email, so it doesn't have to be all bulked into one kind of the follow-up one. It can be really spread out over the rest of the emails, but it's kind of continuing that narrative. So you've seen that our recommendations for that first email are that it's short and sweet. You don't want to waste real estate. You want to get right into the value, right into the impacts, right into the relevance. You don't want to waste space. But as you continue the emails, you can start to add in those other things that you might like the prospect to know about your company, and that kind of continue to build your credibility and build that story. So the types of things that you can start to drop in are like a relevant customer story. So you can say we're targeting somebody like Pepsi. You can say Coca-Cola used us to achieve XYZ. That's obviously a type of company that they can see themselves in. It's a very relevant customer story. And that's another instance where you really want to pay attention to that segmentation, because for instance, if I can work with any consumer brand company in the world and I'm targeting a mid-market kind of, smaller up and coming consumer brand, and I say, we've helped companies like Coca-Cola do XYZ, maybe not really going to resonate with them exactly, because they know they're not the same type of company. So you really want to pick the relevant customer stories here. Another thing that you can incorporate are your case studies. So it's really great to leverage the work that your marketing team, your revenue org has already done for you. And because your customers have already told you how you've solved this problem that they've had. And they've said in their own words what the problem was, why it sucked, and kind of why they wanted the solution. So you can go through there, have a look at how these people that are actually out there doing the job in the role, in your ICP, how they're talking about it, what language they're using, and use that, leverage that, and say, so-and-so was a CTO that we helped do XYZ. Before we worked together, he was experiencing this issue. It wasted time. It lost this money, whatever the impact was. We allowed him to, and here's the new positive impact. So it's great to kind of weave in your case studies, your customer stories, to continue that story and kind of split it up over each of the follow-up emails. And once again, you can kind of test it. What order you put those in, how long the emails are, the space between them. There's a lot of wiggle room in the follow-ups. Yeah. And then CTAs.
Yeah. Before that, just to build upon the collateral things, what we have technical input around those. So we have seen that when you use the hyperlinks, it affects the deliverability. So whenever you are attaching something or sending a link, either copy paste the exact link to the website or the page, or attach those PDFs. So that hampers the deliverability, and it is better that if you attach or send the original link rather than creating a hyperlink within the email.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another reason why you'd want to make sure to leave that stuff out from your initial email. You don't want anything to potentially, hinder the deliverability of that initial, but you can start to weave those things in a little bit later, knowing that probably in most scenarios, your initial emails have already gone through. Great add in there, Rajat.
Thanks. So coming on to the CTAs, so I touched upon the softer CTAs when you are sending the first two emails. So a general thoughts around the CTAs are, you need to be very clear and concise with the CTAs. You would not like putting in or making your prospect think too much. So he should be knowing what you want from him. Eventually, when you are sending the third, fourth, or fifth email, you should be telling them, okay, I need 30 minutes of yours to just explain what our product does. Are you available this or next week? My calendar looks like this. So one hard CTA. That will be all.
Nice. And then finally, another type of email that you want to incorporate at the end of your sequence, and again, regardless of kind of how it looks in the middle there, is your breakup email. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can do this. There are some ways that don't work so well anymore. And then there are some ways that have definitely performed well recently. You may have seen those kind of joking emails that were like, hey, I haven't heard from you yet. That's probably for one of four reasons. Tell me which one it is. Like A, you got eaten by a crocodile. B, you don't like me. C, whatever. So those did work very well at a time. That time is no more. So those ones we don't recommend at this point, but certainly incorporating a breakup email where you're letting them know like, hey, this is the last touch for now. I'm giving up, and asking kind of one last Hail Mary of a question. The types of questions that have worked really well for me in the breakup email are the no-oriented questions. So once again, we talk about people don't want to say yes. If they're making it to the end of the sequence, you haven't quite piqued their interest, or you haven't shown them enough value that they feel comfortable saying yes for that conversation. But if you ask a no-oriented question at the end, you might get a response. So something like, is X business function no longer a priority for you? Or is this not of interest to you? Or do you not want to implement XYZ at your company? Just something that gives them the opportunity to go like, no, okay, it is a priority, instead of going for the yes question again at the end. And the subject lines that have worked really well for me here are things like just the two words, last one. That was my top performing subject line for these breakup emails. And again, they can be short and sweet, just something like, hey, I've been trying to get in touch with you over the past couple of weeks. Seems like it's not the best time. Is X no longer a priority for you? Or Justin Michael likes to go for more appealing to their human side, where he goes like, hey, I'm obviously speaking to the wrong person, or it's not a good time for you. Would you please do me a favor and just let me know who I could be speaking out to instead? So kind of just appealing to them as a good Samaritan. And a lot of people will turn around and go, here's why I'm not responding. It's not a fit for us. And even if they say, I don't want to give up my colleague's information or anything, that's okay. At least you've got your no instead of just no reply. But the breakup email can be a really, really great thing to throw on at the end. And we've seen a big spike. You see, as Rajat says, a lot of our replies come in at that bumper email, which might be the second or third email. It dips, and then it does spike up again on that last one email or the breakup email.
Yeah, I totally agree with Sarah on this. So I remember once I used a breakup email saying that, okay, what is stopping you from being more awesome? So, I mean, it's boils down to playing with the prospect psyche. Just making them realize that, okay, using this tool or service, they can be better at what they do.
Absolutely. Well, we'd love to show you some examples of when we've actually used this type of messaging. Maybe for a tiny bit of context, Rajat, will you tell us the types of clients that you build this stuff for? Just kind of a general on the ICP that they would be targeting.
Right. So most of my clients are in the B2B SaaS industry. The difference I have seen is either the product of one client is a must-have, the product of other client can be good to have. And more the competition out there, more you have to be niche with your list, your target market. You have to understand, okay, if there are many competitors out there, where do I stand? How am I different from my competitors? And why should the prospect I'm talking to should be talking to me and not the competitor? So as an overview, I'm working with a company which deals with compliance and risks. They have a tool. I'm also working with a company who has a messaging platform, a bulk messaging platform. I'm also working with a company who are into purely oil and gas and building materials and industrial sector. So I mean, I'm targeting various kind of industries where you have to change your messaging a bit. You have to be more formal in some cases, a bit casual in some cases, marketing folks, financial folks. So yeah, I mean, that's a mixed bunch.
Nice. But the good thing about this framework is that when you are addressing that relevance piece, it does fit any particular industry, as long as you are making the effort to tweak those things, speak their language, use your research that you've done into this particular customer profile. This framework works across the board. So yeah, why don't you share your screen and we'll have a look at some examples.
Sure. So these are a couple of emails I am using right now. So just let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes.
Awesome. So this email actually conforms with the framework I had told you. Just the prerequisite of it is you should be very niche with the ICP you are targeting to. I mean, the same problem in the same company, in the same target company, a VP or the CXO may not be feeling that problem, what a manager will be feeling. So you have to understand what your list is. Are you targeting the C-suite? Are you targeting the managers? And according to that, you have to think about the problem statement you are starting with. So this is for the senior management who have managers working under them. So I was talking to the client and I was talking about what are the day-to-day problems these ICPs are facing when they're trying to do their jobs. So for example, is your team still Googling the standards and regulations needed in your product lifecycle, or are you outsourcing these requirements? So when I was talking to the client, I came to know that there are only two ways these ICPs work. Either they Google, because there is no other way, or they outsource this to a third party, which again, in the end, Google's the regulations, but that's their work, their sole work. So that is the problem statement I started with. And then I painted a picture. Okay, what if you don't need to do it from now on? I just give you a Bible, a technical Bible, technological Bible, where you can just put in something and you have the answers. So painting a picture, how their life can be easier, how can they save time? I'm not mentioning that they save time, but implying that. And eventually I have put in three kinds of CTAs I have been using, which are working for me. For example, if this is something you think could make your life easier, let's talk, a softer CTA in the first email. Or will it be a terrible idea to connect and discuss? So This works because the answer to this is no. It is not a terrible idea. I'm not looking for a yes, I'm looking for a no. Not a terrible idea. Yeah, we can connect for 15 minutes. That's what I want my prospect to think when he reads this CTA. Lastly, I was talking to someone in the sales industry. He told me that salespeople always talks in prime numbers. So this is something I've been experimenting, and this has been really interesting to me. If nothing else piques the interest of your prospect, at least this 19 minutes will pique, because everyone writes 15 or 30 or 60. So when I have been listening to my prospects that, okay, this was interesting, yeah, we can connect for 19 minutes. You eventually send the calendar for 30 minutes, but yeah, this is something, some tactics we are following to have the replies, have the open rates.
Nice, very cool. And I don't think we had anybody send over a live example, which is totally okay. That's always something that you guys can send over to us separately. You can always ping me on LinkedIn and send me over an email, and I'll be happy to have a look at it. But this is, considering that we started about 10 minutes late on the live, we are right at the half-hour mark right now. So I would love to open up the floor for a couple of questions. If anybody who is with us on the YouTube has any questions, let me know. Maybe just stick up your hand or write in the chat, and we can unmute you and you can join us and ask that question live, or you can just ask the question in the chat as well if there's anything that you would like to know about, whether it's about these email frameworks, about CTAs, about subject lines, whatever it might be. Feel free to ping us a question into the chat, or even to just ask it live. I will keep an eye on the chat here for a couple of seconds. But if nothing else, then that is totally okay. Here we go. We've got a question from Robin. Do you use emojis in your subject line? What do you think?
So again, when I talk about abbreviations or everything in caps, emojis fall into that bucket. So we have seen it affects the deliverability. The best thing to do is use all lower cases. Do not use any keywords like I mentioned, like optimization, sales, best. So yeah, that's the best practice. I would not recommend anyone to use emojis in the subject line, just to make sure that the emails are being delivered and not going into spam.
Yeah, agreed. Great answer. Tomas, what's your take on video prospecting? This one's an interesting one because this is something that I have tried myself as an SDR, and I'm also working with one of our clients where one of their SDRs is trying this out in their prospecting. So in my experience with video prospecting, it is a little bit more time consuming than your normal standard prospecting, because you are having to, generally speaking, you should be doing a specific personalized video for each of your prospects rather than just sending out the same video to everybody. A couple of things that I have tried in the past. So I tried the thing where you hold up a whiteboard where it has the person's name written so that you can show that it's personalized to them. Apparently that is a little bit outdated now, according to Vidyard. It doesn't have the same kind of, doesn't generate the same kind of clicks on those videos or same kind of views as it used to. But another one that is really great right now is because you can have a background when you're using Vidyard specifically, and you can use Vidyard for free to do your videos. You can have basically a green screen background where you can put a website. So if you start off with something like your prospect LinkedIn or your prospect's website, that is a really good thing right now to pique their interest. As for kind of rules of thumb, best practices for videos, under 30 seconds, make the first 15, 20, 25 seconds really, really prospect centric, where at the very least persona and pain centric, not about you. Not like, hey, my name's Sarah. I'm reaching out for predictable revenue because I wanted to start a conversation. I've already wasted 10 seconds there and you don't know why I'm reaching out. But if the thumbnail is giving them the hint, and what's behind me gives them a hint, and I dive right into pains, solutions to the pains, again, the impact, not my solution, my features, then I think video prospecting can certainly work. But you've got to be able to dedicate the time to it. You want to be sending like 30 to 40 a day to make it a viable practice and to actually kind of gather learnings quickly. You want to build yourself a good, strong sequence that refers back to that video so that you kind of leverage a few times throughout the sequence. You can even start a new thread on like the fourth step where you send the email brand new, change up the subject line, use the same video, and just say like, hey, new copy. Just try it again. You can take the video, the Vidyard link, and you can drop it in LinkedIn. Again, same video. So you do need to build kind of a robust sequence around that. And if you're curious, we did a Vidyard webinar with Vidyard last year. So you can look that up and see what their best practices are. And we actually did a little experiment of sequences against each other. And we talk about the steps that go into those sequences. So you can have a look at that there. But I do think it's a great approach to incorporate video. Certainly something a lot of people still are not doing. So it'll set you apart. Thanks for those 2 questions, guys. Any other questions out there before we let you guys go back to your days, probably prospecting, hitting the phones, hitting the video? Robin, any tips for how to sign off your email? Okay, Rajat, what are your thoughts there?
Sign off. So yeah, generally, again, talking about metrics because I'm a number person. So we have seen that best works well rather than more formal sign-offs like yours respectfully or anything of that sort. So best and your name. And generally, again, talking about the deliverability part, do not tend to include the images of the signature and everything. So signature should be real simple, just your name, your designation, that's it. Yeah, I mean, the more casual, the better it is, the more human it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. That's exactly what I would have said. Best, and then as little as possible in terms of links, images, all that stuff in the subject line to preserve your deliverability for sure. Thanks, everybody. Thanks again for joining us on a different platform than you expected to join us on. So thankful to all of you guys who have been so flexible. And we will get this recording up on YouTube, so you can go back and watch it in the place that you would have seen it earlier. You can direct people if they were going to watch later, and we'll make sure to send out the link as we usually do. But thank you guys so much again for joining Rajat and I for this how to write emails that get replies.